Hello, hello. Ron Callis again, trying to go live and trying to get technology to behave. We're going to see if, in fact, we are streaming correctly. Last time we went live, we were live on LinkedIn, but we were not live on Facebook. So we're trying to fix that now. I'm going to refresh my Facebook and see if we are streaming correctly. It does look like we are, which is positive. And I did just get a notification from LinkedIn that we are also live streaming on LinkedIn, which is good. It's just progress. All right, we are good. I just got the message from Jessica. We are good. So hello to you all. Thanks for tuning in live. And if you're watching on replay, thanks for watching it on replay. Today is Wednesday, July 7th. It is a little bit actually after 12:45 p.m. Eastern time. And while we were dealing with some of the technical glitches in the matrix, Brett, my guest, was teaching me the backstory on the word snafu, because I said, it looks like we have a snafu. And Brett taught me, Ron, do you know what snafu means? And or do you know where the origin of that word is? And I was like, no, I don't. He's like, it's a military term for situation normal, all effed up. I'm not going to curse because I don't know if there's children around, so I'll keep it at that. So situation normal, all effed up. And I think that pretty accurately describes our software not cooperating. But here we are. We are live, and I'm happy that you all are joining me on both platforms. If you don't mind, drop into the notes and tell me where you're coming to us from, and I will do my best to field those notes or comments. And we are just coming off of the July 4th weekend or holiday, and I know here at One Firefly we were closed on Monday. And yesterday was we were back in action, and it felt like we were, at least for myself, like I was drinking from a fire hose. Life and business are coming at us fast and furious. And additionally, just on a personal note, I've had a lower back issue most of my professional life. Many of you maybe at CEDIAs have seen me, depending on the year, maybe buzzing around the show on a scooter, because sometimes I can't walk very well because my back isn't cooperating. And this past Sunday, I had probably the worst back spasm, or basically you could call it your back giving out on you, maybe of my life. It was pretty terrifying and pretty awful. And here as I'm thinking, I'm sorry for myself, and by the way, I'm very thankful that I'm back here in my office in this chair. This is the first day since all that went down. And then my guest, Brett Ringeisen, sent me over the prep notes for this show. And he did a wonderful job of giving me a lot of his backstory and kind of where he comes from and how he came to be where he is, running the successful business that he is. And I learned a lot about his challenges with his back, and let's just say they're dramatically more severe than mine. And we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But it's all about the theory of relativity. And your situation is always relative to other situations. So whereas I was feeling sorry for myself on Monday and literally wasn't able to move, the reality is there are people out there right now, people listening, and you'll hear Brett's story, that their situations, their medical situations are far more severe. And so I was quickly humbled and realized that under normal circumstances, I would regain mobility, which I have. And, other people to varying degrees, some are never able to regain their mobility. And the good news is, and I think Brett's story is going to be a Hallmark movie one day, maybe on the big screen when movie theaters come back, right, Brett? we might see his story on the big screen, but it's really an amazing story of triumph, and it's right here, born in our industry. So without further ado, for show 177, I'm going to bring on Brett Ringeisen, and he is the director of the Audiohouse. And let me go ahead and bring Brett on. Brett, how are you, sir?
Hey, Ron. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. So we survived the snafu.
Yes, we did. I'm glad you've learned the origin of the term here.
Were you in the military at some point, or how did you learn that term?
No, my dad was. My dad was a Korean fighter pilot, and I'm surrounded, which I can't turn the cameras on, by some of his pilot medals and picture of his Corsair. But no, he taught me that. He taught me snafu earlier, or taught me the origin early. So
I think everyone listening can relate to we've accompanying varying levels of snafus, sometimes daily, weekly, monthly, and it's not if you're going to have that; it's what do you do about it, right?
That's right. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, you're talking about your back and some of the physical challenges I've faced, and it all harkens back to Tom Petty's song, "You Don't Know What It's Like to Be Me."
I hear the tune ringing in my ears right now. That's so accurate. All right, so we're going to get into so many fun, interesting, challenging topics. I've known you for a long time. I want to say probably back to the early 2000s when I moved into Florida, and I called on you
as a Crestron guy. Yeah,
as a Crestron guy. That is accurate. Give us a quick understanding. What is the Audiohouse? Maybe a brief synopsis of your business and then your role within the business.
Sure. Okay. Well, I am the director of the company, and we are a one-store operation in Vero Beach, Florida. And we have 12 employees. We've been about that same size from day one, and that's been since 1970. And obviously, we've changed a lot over the years, and maybe you'll give me an opportunity to chat about a little about that. But right now, we're kind of doing what probably most everybody else is doing. We're integrating clients' beautiful homes, typically high-end homes. We're fortunate to live in a very wealthy winter home community, doing all the custom AV integration, shades, lighting, etc. And I've got a good crew, good people here.
Your role personally, do you find yourself selling or interacting with clients in that capacity, or are you running the company day to day, or what are normal roles and responsibilities for you in a week or month look like?
No, that's a good question. Well, I'm director of the company, and since I had an accident back in 1999, not so mobile. So I've done a lot of the selling over the years, and certainly the majority of the high end selling. But I now run the company and run the operations and oversee things. I'm typically here every day. I love the business. I think it's challenging. It's one of the things that's made me super excited about being alive from day one, all through the trying periods. And I am very involved in all the operations of it every day.
Got it. Mostly residential or 100% resi in terms of the types of jobs you guys do?
Yeah, Vero Beach there's really not much commercial business here. It's not a bedroom town of a large town, so we don't have many, certainly nothing industrial, not much commercial, so it's almost all residential, yes.
Okay. Well, let's go back in time. How long has the Audiohouse, and I'm just going to tell you what I think I know, which I know is I think that you and your family moved to Florida, and your dad acquired a number of businesses, and one of them was this record store. But I'll let you tell the story. You have a lot more colorful details, and I'll maybe chime in along the way. But you've been at this. You've been at this game of audio, video, and technology, and serving, your customers for many decades.
Yeah, we started. The company started in 1970 when my dad moved his family from Louisiana to Florida. My dad and my one brother, Chet, drove up and down the coast, found a little town of Vero Beach in 1970 and said, yeah, this looks like a nice spot, not in a major metropolitan area, but beautiful East Coast location. And he picked two businesses to buy. One was a orthotics store and the other one was a record store. And I think I told you, I made a note. I'm really glad he picked the record store because I wouldn't want to be selling orthotics or prostheses or those kind of things. This is a lot more exciting industry. So yeah, we started, it was selling records and tapes at that point. There was a few stereo components, and that's kind of how we got into audio back in the early days, 1970. So that was Scott components, some Advent speakers were in there. It was obviously the early days of the industry. And
in those early record stores, or let's just say, was it called the Audiohouse in the 70s?
No, it was the Norris Record Center. So we upgraded to the Norris Record and Tape Center because 8 tracks started coming out. And then we changed it to the Audiohouse probably 2 years later.
Okay, because you saw maybe more technologies coming out. Like, we can't change our name every time a new format comes out.
That's right.
So we'll be all things audio. At what point did the business go from just selling the tapes or 8 tracks or records and whatnot to also selling the gear? Did it always sell the gear, or was that an evolution of the business?
No, good question. We had a couple pieces of gear in there, but it really took off. There was a fellow named Jay Young who's since passed away. He was a young man. He was the valedictorian of the high school, and he decided to take a 2 years off from college. And he came to my dad and said, hey, I know a little bit about this kind of stuff, audio and video. And so my dad hired him. My dad didn't know a thing about stereos or, he just knew he wanted to do something on his own. So hired Jay. Jay started bringing in audio and video equipment, or no video, actually. There was TV stores at the time, but brought in some amplifiers and turntables and moved in that direction. And I was 14 at the time, and I hung out at the store. My 2 brothers they hang out too, but neither of them were so interested in sticking around the store. But I was fascinated. I loved talking to people and playing with the records and playing with the gear. So I kind of took to it like a fish takes to water.
We have a comment here, and it's Jamie Harrison. And so Jamie actually, first of all, says he worked at the Audiohouse from 86 to 2000. And then he says, ask Brett about Dooley Underwood.
Oh,
all right. So Brett, who is that, or what is that?
All right. Well, good question. Jamie, good to talk to you. Yeah, Jamie was a big part of our business back in the early days in the 80s and up to 2000. He did all of our installations. So Dooley Underwood was our technician. We had my dad realized that back in those days you need to do repairs, and that's unheard of in these days. It's basically a throwaway society, or if you have something expensive you ship it back to the factory. But back in those days you'd have service centered. So this fellow walked into the store and he looked kind of like Doc from Back to the Future and said, hey, yeah, I know a little bit about stereos and I can fix anything. And he had his pipe in his mouth. And so Dooley actually started with Bill Lear, and who invented the 8-track player, which most people don't know. Bill Lear is more famous for the Lear Jet, which obviously he's made a lot more money on. But Dooley worked for Bill Lear back in the 60s and moved to Vero Beach to retire. And my dad hired him, and that guy fixed just about anything and everything for probably the time Jamie was here, probably, early, well, he was in the 70s to probably 1990 when he died. But yeah, Dooley was a trip here.
That's now, you to go back to the 70s. You said you were 14. Was this was this your job? Were you going to high school and then come into the record store to work it, or did you just do weekends, or how did that work out?
Yeah, no, it was a dream come true. So I didn't know anyone in town, but since I had access to 45s and 33s, I was a popular kid. I'd be invited to the parties and I'd spin the discs. Back then, the records, 45 sold for 99 cents, a 33 sold for $3.98. But I fell right into it, and I love talking to people. So back in the early 2000s, or back in the early 70s rather, the LA Dodgers used Vero Beach as their spring training facility, which they did from 1945 to I think 2003, 2004. So back in the early days, we had a store downtown, and the Dodgers, all the famous Dodgers, would come in and buy records and buy some equipment from us. So we'd be talking to Don Drysdale and Sandy Koufax and Maury Wills and Walter Alston and all these famous LA Dodgers, and hanging out with those guys. We're also by the only movie theater in town. It's called the Florida Theater. So this was the hot spot to be. So, but that was downtown, which eventually started dying. So my dad at that point found a shopping center close to the beach. It looked like it was going to be a new location for a lot of traffic coming across from the wealthy beach. And he bought a lot there where we built the store, which I am currently in right now. So that was back in 1976. And that's when I went to college, and then came back and went full time. So I'm kind of a one trick pony, Ron. It's really the only thing I know is AV gear my whole life from an early age.
What did you study in college?
Advertising. There's a source near and dear to your heart. So,
yes, it is.
Work out for me,
I'm going to call you. I'm just saying, get your resume updated just in case.
Maybe the next 50 years, right? So this is our 50th anniversary last year, 1970 to 2020. So
I'm afraid I won't be able to afford you, so I'm just putting that out there. But just in case you're willing to take a step down or two or three.
All right. Well, we'll see here.
That's funny. So when you joined the store, you came here right after college?
Yeah. Well, actually, I went to work. The one job, which was really pretty instrumental in my development, I went to work, and you may have heard of this, is a company called Southwestern Book Sales. And this is a company that sold Bible stories and reference books, and they'd recruit college kids. So right before I graduated, or actually right after I graduated, before I came to work for my dad, I took a summer job through them and went up to Nashville and learned how to sell books. And they sent us up to sent everybody to different cities around the country. And they sent me to Boone, Iowa, which at that time was in the boondocks and still is, but the corn crop was good that year. So the economy was great. So it was fertile grounds, figuratively and literally speaking, for a bookseller. And so we'd go up there, and they'd tell you how to not spend any money and save some money. So I found a cheap place to stay at a lady's home, and we worked 13 and a half hours a day, 6 days a week. So it was a 78-hour week. And you talk about learning to deal with rejection, loneliness, a lot of no's before you get some yeses. That job will do you. So anybody out there that is wanting to, maybe their kids have had a little bit of easy time growing up, like we are all want to do. We want our kids to have a simple way, or a good life. Send them to Southwestern Book Company and do some book sales, and they'll learn rejection.
Wait, was this your plan to do that? Was this your dad's plan or your mom and dad's plan, or how did the decision to do that, or was it the cash? Did you see the opportunity to make some cash?
That was the cash, Ron. I didn't have any money at the time. I remember my dad told me when I got here, he said, "Look, I'm going to pay you $10,000 a year," which was a lot of money at the time. But I didn't have any money. I was making $2 an hour back then, working for my dad, which was the going rate.
Was that minimum wage? Was $2 an hour minimum wage?
Boy, you got me. I don't even know if they had a minimum wage.
I don't either.
Yeah, but I didn't have any money, so I went up there and, without any idea, but I came home with about $5,000, which was probably tripled the money that I had in my bank account. So it was a lucrative summer of fun here.
I can imagine. And so how many summers did you just do that once, or you did that multiple years?
One summer, and then came into work in 1970. And then, back in those days, we did a little bit of car stereo. That was fledgling back there. Nobody was doing anything. So we'd hang 8-track players under the dash. The cassettes were just coming out. I remember, getting underneath the dash and, getting all cut up and taking a 1-inch hole saw and putting in FM antennas. And that was a really interesting time back in the day. But and that was also kind of the golden age of home stereo. And you've been around long enough to know that the 70s, it was 2-channel. There was no such thing as quadraphonic at the time. There was no audio and video, nothing. Nobody tied a TV together because there was no VCR, so nobody even had that inclination. So learning to sell stereos was a dream come true. And I remember we were one of the first Yamaha dealers in the state. So if AMI sales, Keith Halpern's one of my mentors. He owns AMI and still runs it, but he came up and he brought a Yamaha receiver. And he said one of the first things people asked him, they look at this Yamaha receiver and they say, "Where's the Kickstarter on this thing?" Yamaha being known for motorcycles, of course, and nobody knew of them doing AV. Of course, they're a musical instrument manufacturer. But anyway, so Keith taught me a lot about selling. We were a PARA member back then. And for some of you old timers, PARA was they're called the Professional Audio Retailers Association. And they taught us how to close, how to do demos. It was pre-CEDIA days. So we got ourselves educated. We're pretty good at that. We had a beautiful sound room. All the equipment back then. We sold reel-to-reels and turntables, and you learned all the specs, how much total harmonic distortion this has, because people cared about that at the time. And they'd A-B a certain speaker, and we'd sit them there, and we'd play, one cut and play another cut. So it was fun. A lot of fun selling stereo back then, and now people don't care so much about it. Although we're a Macintosh dealer and we sell high-end stuff, but not like back then.
So when we say back then, let's just to help the audience, are we talking back in the 80s?
No, this is the 70s.
So still the 70s.
Okay. Still the 70s, right? And then that changed a little bit when the VCR, and boy, I don't have a picture. I'll post it later on. I got a picture. It was really fascinating. So the first big screen came out. We were an Advent. We were an Advent speaker dealer. So Advent came out with a speaker or a TV called the Video Beam. Okay. So this was.
Is this the big box that had the projector and it shot onto the screen?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's two pieces. It was a separate screen, and then the big box. Yes. Okay. And I'll post that later on so you could see it. But I had scored one of those. We had one of the first in the country. This was probably 1980. And so I called the newspaper and I had them take a picture of me next to the Advent Video Beam and a VCR. And the article described, all right, this TV is 10 times bigger than a 19-inch TV, which was standard at the time. And a VCR is something that you can record your own movies or sometimes play movies. So the point of that is nobody was tying audio and video together. So that was kind of the moment where they integrated audio and video together. So then surround sound receivers followed from there.
What would an Advent TV cost in maybe today's dollars, or how could you help our audience understand like the price point you were selling that type of solution at?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it was $39.95.
39, so $4,000 in the mid 1970s.
Yeah, this was probably 1980.
1980. All right, so someone out there listening, do some math for us. Use the interwebs. Help us understand what $4,000 in 1980 would mean here in 2021 dollars. That'll be a fun bit of trivia. Now, at your store at that point in time, what percentage of the business was car audio versus home audio or home technology?
Well, through the 70s, it was just a little bit of car, but mostly home audio, and we still did records and tapes. Once frankly, once tapes started to come online, the record business started fading away, and we saw the writing on the wall, and so we devolved, or we disassociated ourselves from records and tapes and went strictly to audio and video. So, or audio, and actually we ended up bringing Sony TVs on. There were a couple other TVs in store, but what was fascinating that is at the time is we sold anything electronics, right? We had a few TVs, but we would bring in, we had cassette decks, we had clock radios, we had answering machines. And all right, here's the interesting trivia. An answering machine, all right, you don't have answering machines anymore. And then back in the latter days, answering machines sold for $29 or $90. An answering machine would be $300 or $400. So we'd make recorder calls and codophones. We make good money selling an answering machine. A clock radio was a big deal. We were the only store in town that sold any of this electronics. This is before the consumer electronics industry really existed.
This is before Best Buy.
Yeah, no Best Buy, no
Circuit City.
Thank you. I was trying to remember Circuit City.
Sound Advice, Tweeter.
Yeah, no. Well, Sound Advice started about the same time we did as an audio store, and they morphed into a little bit of a chain, a regional chain. But there's certainly no nationwide company. So, we sold just about anything and everything. We were the only town you could buy a VCR tape or a cassette tape, and now, obviously the world's changed, but. It was a lot of fun being the go-to place for technology. And then, so the 80s kind of came in. And actually, here's an interesting thing in the 70s. You talk about going back is the CB radio craze. Ron, you're
Smokey and the Bandit.
Ron, you tell me you're 43. So that's
right.
This happened in 1973. There was an oil embargo that was placed, and
I've read about it in the history books.
Yeah, the speed limit was nationwide 55 miles an hour. So that was a problem because everybody had lead foots, and I was going off to college, and this was 73. It started. And I don't remember how many years the speed limit was kept. It was 3 or 4 or 5 years that you couldn't go over 55 legally. So obviously, law-abiding citizens took things into their own laws into their own hand. Everybody put these CB radios in their car, which created a boom market for us. And in addition to our car stereo, we were selling these, and everybody's trying to get away from Smokey, right? Smokey and the Bandit was huge. That further cemented this into the psyche of the nation. And I had a handle. I was the Beach Boy, and the Barbara Bush at the time. She was called the First Mama. She had a handle. So everybody got into this craze. It was a lot of fun. We sold a lot of.
I got my first car, I want to say, when I was 16. It was a Dodge Daytona Turbo that the turbo would randomly kick in. I bought the car for $600.
Right.
I sold the car 3 years later for $600. And the car came with a CB radio. And so I would be cruising around talking on the CB radio, not knowing the right protocols. And, I went in. That would have been the super, super early days of the internet and the bulletin boards, BBSs. Yeah. And I would go out and look up the right handles, because there's a whole lexicon of how to talk on a CB radio. So that you're
1020 and what's your location?
What's your location? Call say. Anyway, I can't even pretend to do it now. It's so many decades from my memory banks, 30 years. But I relate to that. I played around with one of those when I was as a kid.
And so then that morphed. So the 70s kind of morphed, went to obviously the next decade, brought in the 80s. And for our store, most of our business was car audio. So that started to come on strong. The car audio companies, or the car companies, didn't put good radios in the car. Very good speakers. Detroit and Japan didn't really see the need for that yet. So that opened up the heyday for car stereo.
It was all about the Alpine radio with the removable faceplate.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
I bought those. Every extra dollar I made from cutting grass went into my Alpine stereo.
Absolutely. So this is when the high-tech stuff came into play, and for cars, we're putting multiple amps in people's cars. So we saw the writing on the wall, and we started to do just a ton of business. So we built a add-on garage in the back of our store. We hired more installers, and we picked up the best lines. We finagled Alpine away from one of our competitors, because actually that's another Keith Halpern tweak. He was a buddy of mine in the rep, and Keith liked us, so he marched into the other dealer in town who's no longer in business. So I'm not fearful of retribution by saying this right now, and said, well, you guys aren't doing enough business, and gave us the line, which was great. So we did a lot of Alpine. We did Rockford Fosgate. Back in those days, we were doing Jensen and the 6x9 speakers and Pyle subwoofers. And, I tell you what, and doing the work inside of a car when you're upside down, you're hot and sweaty. 10 years later, when we got out of car audio and we moved into the stuff we do now, working in an attic is a luxury.
It's a piece of cake. Look at all that elbow room you have in that attic.
Yeah. So the big thing back in the car audio days that really spurred more adoption and more energetic buying by these testosterone fueled kids that were, probably your age and 16 to 25 and spending every bit of disposable income on car audio, or the car audio competitions. So Alpine had a competition called Car Audio Nationals, which they held around the world or around it may have been around the world, certainly around the country. But we bought into that, and we held some competitions here, and we did it for probably 7 or 8 years. And at the peak of that, Ron, we probably had 100 cars lined up, and we had basically I'm selling hot dogs out there, and there's a band out there, and we somehow finagled the superintendent of schools to let us use the school next door, their grounds, to hold one of these. And so we had a lot of fun judging and selling car audio, and people would spend their just last dollar. Matter of fact, I remember this one guy came in with a bag full of dollar bills, and we found out this guy was a crack dealer. But you know what? He bought that amplifier and stereo and ended up, I think it was $5,001 bills that we had to take over to the bank to get
nothing sketchy about that.
No, but that was, you talk about a fun part of the business. I was probably 25, single at the time, and I was pretty cool back when I was 14 selling 33s and 45s, but I was really cool when I was the car audio guy and I was 25 and having a lot of fun with it. And I got some free trips to Hawaii too out of it. Alpine, if you did 20 grand in sales a year, they'd send you to their national sales convention every year. So I got to go to Maui and Kauai, and I had some great trips on Alpine's dime.
So bring us into the 90s. What changed in the business?
Okay. Well, car audio had its day, and it was kind of fading out, and we realized that we needed to change. So right about that time, our town grew, Florida started growing, and the custom audio business, as you well know, started to come into its own. We had been doing home installations for many years. We'd buy commercial products, Pile speakers and Atlas Soundolier, and there was no custom business at the time, or in the 70s and really the early 80s. And clients would want speakers in different areas of their home. So we'd contact the commercial reps, which were the only guys at the time to make those products. And then, of course, Sonance came into play. I think those guys were the first. Speakercraft followed shortly afterwards. Companies started to make the products for the custom home industry, and CEDIA formed back in, I think, 1989. So we got excited about that, and we went to the first CEDIA convention, or I was there in Amelia Island. This was back in 1990. A buddy of mine, Mike McCree, he owned a company called Automotive Audio. Now it's called Digital Systems up in Jackson, Mississippi. Mike and I met him back in one of the conferences, the Alpine conferences. He and I went to that first CEDIA conference in 1990, and we brought our big camcorders with us and set them up in the back of the room, and we recorded every session. I was just enthralled at what to learn and how much information was available and how exciting this new market was for custom home audio. And I still have those tapes in the back room somewhere in the archives in the vault. Ronnie, it's probably worth something.
Right? It's probably worth something to somebody. Heck, I've heard so many stories about the beginning days of CEDIA. What I would also add, just funny enough, so often when I interview guests, like the origin is they talk about CEDIA, the first CEDIA, and they attended the show. It's funny, like in your story, that's only in the middle of the story. So much of your business and your experience precede that by so many decades. So it's 1993. That sounds like almost yesterday.
That's
looking
right.
at how much you've already gone through in life and in business.
Yeah.
I have to give my brother a shout out. My brother's tuned in, Matt Callis, and he says, never forget jamming out to Metallica with your big old subwoofers. That he's talking about me because I made some home speakers in my little. I had a little SUV, Suzuki something another. I forget what it was. I think it had like an 80 horsepower engine. But man, did I have some big speakers in that sucker that I had made in my garage. And I remember they had Jensen. You mentioned Jensen earlier. They had Jensen something and others in them. So
well, we went to Rockford, RTTI. This is Rockford Technical Training Institute. I remember that. They teach you how to build fourth order, third order boxes and subwoofers and how to tune them right and all that stuff. So that was a lot of fun. Oh, and I'll tell you what else. We're talking about these shows we had. We all know Jeff Hoover and his company.
Sure.
Ask the Advisors. Back then was Audio Advisors. So Jeff, which I think he's still doing car audio, Ron, is that right? He's still.
I believe so. Yeah, I haven't talked to Jeff in a while, but yeah.
Well, that was his mainstay back then. I think what he first cut his teeth on. So during the Car Audio Nationals, Jeff would give me a call and say, "Hey, you mind if I bring some cars up?" So he'd come up and bring an armada of vehicles, and they'd line them up one after the other, and he did some pretty interesting installs. So
did he like to bring home the hardware?
Yeah, he was pretty tough.
If that's the Jeff Hoover that I know, I would imagine he would. He'd be up there competing.
Yeah, Jeff's not a loss for having a lot of charisma and a lot of
self-confidence.
Thank you. Yeah.
A lot of it well earned. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was the 90s. Custom audio. We've obviously car audio died. The home audio was still going. The multi-room had just come into play. The VCR, all right, there's history. We take it for granted. That thing's been around. But that was just developed in the early 90s. And VCR rentals, Blockbuster. So that ushered in the surround sound systems for their home.
Was that really the infancy of what I today or you would call an integrator, the birth of the integrator, bringing audio and video together in the home?
Absolutely. Well, the CD basically came out at that same time too. The CD was the early 80s. And then they had video discs. I don't know if you remember those.
I remember going to Best Buy in Virginia with my brother who's watching, and my dad would go to the Best Buy store, or not the Best Buy, it was called Best, which was like a Circuit City knockoff. Okay. Circuit City. I'm from Virginia. Circuit City was born in Richmond, and it was a predecessor, I want to say, to Circuit City. It was a store called Best. And I remember seeing the big old laser disc, and they had Star Wars on the laser disc. And I remember sitting there with my brother and my dad, and I think we sat there for an hour and a half and watched Star Wars in the store.
On the big screen.
On the big screen. And that was, the highlight of our youth was going to the electronics store with my dad.
Yeah. Well, we used that. We used ABBA. I remember ABBA was the demo.
But, Dancing Queen.
Dancing Queen, yeah.
Yeah.
But absolutely. That was first thing that brought audio and video together. That was a big impetus for home audio or bringing, upgrading people's systems in their homes and multi-channel sound. That was a big deal. Audio Access was one of the first companies to do multi-room sound. Luxman did a multi-zone receiver at the time. Bill Caulfield at Xantech, he was one of the early engineers who designed all the multi-room switching systems and dinky links, and so that was that was a fun time of piecing that stuff together and making it work in people's homes.
So bring us up to the late 90s when you had obviously your life was in cruise control. Your business was rocking, your family was rocking.
Yeah.
You were 43 years old. Very
Yeah.
humbling. Same age I am right
you
now.
and I were just talking about that, and you're talking about your bad back, and so at 43, so yeah, knock on wood here. So yeah, life was great. I just got married in 1990. I had my son Robbie and my daughter Allie in 92 and 94, and built a new house. Who Jamie Harrison, who's listening here, Jamie actually did all the electric in there. And Jamie, I think that house is still standing. It didn't burn down.
Good job, Jamie. You didn't burn the house down.
Yeah, he was our installer, and I think one of the reasons why I hired him, he said, "Hey, man, I could wire your house too that you're building." I was like, "All right, you're hired."
You're hired.
So yeah, 99. I've always been a athlete, tennis and basketball and baseball. But moving to Florida, I learned to surf, and I'm a huge surfer, so I really love that. Surfed all around the world, and then got into windsurfing, Ron. And so one day in '99, I told the people at work, all right, I'm going to go out for a board meeting, which was code for, all right, I'm stepping out early because the wind is right and the waves are right. So it was a 30-mile-an-hour wind and the waves were big. And so I took jumped in the car and met a friend of mine down at Fort Pierce Inlet, and met a fella in the parking lot first time, guy named Steve Boyle, and went out there. And at the time I was learning tricks. I had done back loops and riding waves and jumping waves, and we wouldn't go out until it's just howling out, and the more extreme conditions the better. It wasn't any flat water stuff. I had done this for since the 80s and learned to sail pretty well, so I was kind of an adrenaline junkie at the time. So I was trying a new trick. I tried a front loop, and that I remember nothing other than laying on my back in the water, and I couldn't move a muscle. I was just lucky.
But you were awake. You were conscious.
I was totally conscious, like sitting there, laying there. It's like, uh-oh, this is a problem. Can't move anything. And was right in between. It was huge waves, big wind. And the fellow I met in the parking lot, Steve Boyle, he just out of sheer luck, because sometimes you're out there, it'll be 15 minutes before anybody comes by. The ocean's a pretty big place. And came up to me and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No, I'm paralyzed." And
you knew it.
Yeah, yeah, nothing was working. Yeah, I was like, "All right, this is a problem." And he's like, "Okay, we're going to get you in." So it was, and another buddy of mine named Russ Metz was out there. He's a doctor, anesthesiologist, who I'd sailed with a bunch. And he knew that, all right, you don't want to do any more damage to Brett than he's got. So trying to get me in through the waves was a real task. So huge waves, huge surf. Literally, they were out there for half an hour. They even called the Coast Guard. They had having a Coast Guard cutter come around the inlet. We were down in Fort Pierce, kind of far away from everything. The conditions were tough. So I don't know how long it took Ron, but probably half an hour, 45 minutes. They finally got me in through the surf and onto a stretcher, which they put me in the ambulance, and they wanted to medevac me down to Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, which is a top-notch spinal surgeon, spinal cord area with the Miami project. But it was too windy. It was tornado warning. So they put me in an ambulance and whisked me down there. And they, I think 2 days later, 3 days later, with swelling goes down. And so I'd broken my neck in the C5, which is the fifth vertebrae down. And they
severed spinal cord or no?
Well, luckily incomplete, right? So it was damaged but not severed, not Christopher Reeve like, but pretty close. That same area, the upper level spinal cord. The higher you go, the higher level, the worse, or the more parts of your body it affects. I was fortunate enough that it didn't completely disassociate or tear the spinal cord, but it bent it enough so it damaged. So I was in the hospital down there for, I think, 3 months, and I learned to I wasn't walking at the time. I couldn't really move either my arms or my legs, anything, and I had to be fed completely. And I remember to this day being in the hospital, and they brought in a piece of paper, and they said, "Oh, you're going to need to, put an X with your teeth or whatever on here." And it was a piece of paper. It said, "All right, you are completely and permanently disabled." Right? I'm like, whoa, that's heavy. So, I've always had a positive attitude about things, and that was a little tough. So we had after being down there 3 months, they got me loaded me up in an ambulance and brought me back to Vero Beach and back home again, which was really nice. But it was just a start. I was in a wheelchair. I remember sit me up on a couch, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, what do I do next?
At what point after the accident did you know that some parts of your body were going to cooperate and come back, or your synapses or whatnot were going to reconnect and you were going to have some mobility? When did you know? How long did it take for that to happen?
Yeah, well, good question. Well, they kept telling me, it could, the first year is where you get what they call return, most of the return. So I couldn't move anything at the time. Otherwise, I could sit up, and I could move my right hand a little bit. So I knew that first year was important, and they said, all right, it's really important to have a great attitude. You want to eat right. You don't want to do anything crazy, like don't smoke any pot or anything. It's like, okay, well, no worries. I will make sure
I would think pot would help, actually.
Well, and I don't know if it did or not, or would or not, but anyways, I wasn't going to test them on that. But over the course of a year, I ended up being able to stand up at least and walk a few steps and kind of use my right hand again, and kind of start working my way back. I went to rehab for another year in Vero Beach, and at the time, my business was booming. At the time, this was 2000, which, if you guys recall, was a boom time, right? The internet, it's just cranked. Technology companies were going through the roof. Building was doing great. We had a job in Vero Beach. It was $1 million job. To this day, it's still our biggest job we did. And I had a really strong company here and a good organization in place. So we were able to withstand me being pretty well out of the loop for the course of the first year. And then I was able to get back into it and get back to work and do everything I needed to do, which was, it was smart that it was a blessing in disguise, because it ended up teaching me delegation and learning other parts of the business that I didn't do. I was doing all the sales prior to that, but being able to delegate responsibility to others was a good thing.
I was just gonna. I mean, this is a high level question, and I'm vaguely remembering different movies I've watched over time about paralysis. Mm-hmm. How did you keep your spirit up when you were laying in bed and you didn't know, and they asked you to sign that with your teeth? I mean, is the honest answer is you weren't always able to keep your spirits up, or what was your state of mind, and what did you take away from that you still have with you today in terms of mental toughness?
No, that's a good question, Ron. I've always been a positive person. I think having that innate inside of me has really helped. But I had some strong friends around. Once again, the good employees at work, which were also very close friends of mine. Just having the attitude of realizing, of looking forward and not back. And this was tough to do. I remember, and I ended up getting a van. I had one of those, an adaptive van. I could get up in the van with my wheelchair, and I'd roll. It was a van that you'd roll the chair up into, and I could slide around and work myself to the seat. And the van had a little tiny steering wheel. It was a fly-by-wire van that it had, I think it was $80,000 full modification that got rid of the big steering wheel, did a little tiny fly-by-wire steering wheel, and I was able to drive that way and get it to work and whatnot. So I remember driving down the road, to answer your question, and seeing people riding their bikes and jogging and just getting angry. That's like, wow, I'm feeling maybe not angry so much, but feeling really sorry for myself. And then, you end up saying, look, that's a loser's game. So you got to look forward. I remember George Westinghouse has a great quote, and he says, I always look forward. I never look back. I'm always thinking about the future. So I planted that in my head, and it wasn't easy. You'd lay awake at night and you'd start, all these thoughts would come through your head. But looking forward is so key to get past any difficult situation like that.
How did that state of mind, just to bring it fully to the present, and when you and everyone listening, myself included, we're entering into 2020, and with all the unknowns of COVID and a lot of the fear and anxiety that we were all certainly faced with in let's call it February, March, maybe April. Has anything come to mind or resonate with you in terms of kind of just how you looked at that situation? I mean, we all, at least here in North America, we know that most integrators and technology businesses that serve the residential customer are doing pretty well right now. But we didn't know that at the beginning of the year, last year. Do you recall kind of how you were approaching going into that situation?
Yeah, it's like, wow, here we go again. Here is something that we have no idea what's going to happen. I kind of thought right off from the front, we all ended up, as you say, Ron, being one of the lucky industries that have benefited from COVID. So many people in business that have not been so lucky, but I remember thinking, it's like, wow, we're going to really benefit from this as long as we're allowed to continue to work. So, we got together and we talked about it as a company, and we said, just everybody just keep clean, keep positive attitudes, work hard. Let's educate ourselves. Let's go through all the strict protocols of safety, and I think we're going to be fine. So yeah, we were lucky, and I didn't particularly see that as a negative.
Got it. Tell us, how is business doing today?
It's good. Like everybody else, the business is booming. It's a challenge, and every year it gets a little, everything's a little different. You've got the internet, the products. It's so difficult to make any money on products now. People are buying their own stuff. You have the automation products where we used to make a lot of money on. Now clients are buying themselves and ask you to piece it together. So that's a challenge, making money on products. So having to morph to a service business is, I think, in the works for everybody. Don't you agree with that? And you're, Ron, I mean, you're the poster child for that. That you're not selling anything but knowledge and bits, and you got 60 people working for you, and you're uber successful, and you really don't have any products. So I think our industry's going to end up going that way, or already is pretty strong right now.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, and I'm not picking on any manufacturer by saying this, but how many Control4 dealers are there? How many Crestron dealers are there? How many Savant dealers? How many people sell Sony? How many people sell Samsung?
Yeah, everybody.
Everybody. The answer to all the above is everybody. And so what's different? It's your expertise, your experience, your ability to serve your client in a unique way. And I think the successful businesses today and into the future are the ones that learn how to successfully convert that to a growing, scalable business that's profitable and positioned for success. And I think a lot of businesses are at points of transition right now, trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
So my vision is, I want our brand to stand for something. And, the whole business is morphing. It's become more service oriented. I want our company to be known where service is a differentiator. We want to be known as a service company that happens to sell home electronics. That's my goal. And that's going to be tough. But if we cross-train our guys on all different areas, I think that's really the only way to go about that. We really want to be the highest customer satisfaction company and the most profitable company. And by cross-training our employees and reducing excessive inventory and reducing options, I think we can get to there. But that's really the goal, and that's my vision of doing, of where things are headed.
Brett, I'm mindful of time, but I know we both want to get one additional person named and story in. So maybe tell me about this fateful interview in 2013 where you were going to be interviewed for a technology story in the newspaper.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Ron, for leading me into that. Boy, I'd be remiss not mentioning Bunny. So I was sitting in my office one day, and actually I'd been calling the local newspaper for getting them, we've done some advertising. I was like, all right, I got to get some free publicity out of this. Let's have those guys do an article on our company. We do some really cool stuff, and we know all of our readers would love to hear about it. So in walked Bunny McDonough, and she was just a vision. So she's a beautiful girl, and she was working for 32963, which is the local newspaper at the time. And I was like, wow, okay. I wasn't dating anybody at the time. It's like, all right, well, can you come back, later on this afternoon? Because she took me aback, Ron, and walked back in and came back that afternoon. And
you had your cologne on for that next meeting.
Yeah, I did. So we sat in the conference room, and I basically walked her all around the store, and we talked about technology, and ended up later that night, and then the next night calling her and helping her write the article, because she's a phenomenal writer. She's written for AP, and she came from Alexandria, Virginia, so she's a Virginia folk like you are. I guess a little bit northern Virginia. You're from Richmond area, you say.
Yeah, that's right.
She was down here helping her mom at the time, and just on the summer break. So she and I started dating at that time, and this is 8 years later, and we're now engaged to be married, and it's the love of my life. And she's done a phenomenal job. She helped us remodel the store. We want to get you up here one day. And
yeah, I'd love to do that. We'll do a live show from the store.
There you go. That'd be great.
That would be awesome. Well, Brett, it has been a pleasure. I could talk to you for hours, and the stories you have and the experiences and the lessons that you have learned and demonstrated, I think are impressive. And I know everyone listening has enjoyed this, because it'd be hard not to see your multi-decade success story. And for all our Hallmark movie producers out there, I just say I'm Brett's agent. So you can contact me at onefirefly.com, and we'll work out the details. Brett, how can the folks that are watching or listening that want to get in touch with you do that? What do you recommend?
Sure. You can email me, Brett, B-R-E-T-T, at audiohouseinc.com, I-N-C. Or you can call me. My cell number is 772-473-2260. So love to hear from you.
Awesome. And we'll put all that down on the show notes, both on the social platforms, and we'll also get that up on our website on our Automation Plugged page. Brett, I want to thank you, sir. I know you and I have been talking for a number of months to get you scheduled and coordinated to be on the show. And I want to thank you for taking time with us today. It was a lot of fun.
Well, it was a lot of fun, and thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. All right, folks, there you have it. The one and only Brett Ringeisen. And he informed me that Ringeisen is German, and it stands for Ring of Iron. And if Brett's fortitude is not iron-like, I don't know what is. It's you just think about it, and I can think about it, because this was me on Monday of this week. Today's Wednesday. I was laid up in my bed, and I couldn't move. Like, physically, I couldn't move. I was in a very bad spot. And so for only a strike of an instant, I felt what Brett talked about, taking him several years of recovery before he regained mobility and feeling. Just think about how you would react under similar circumstances. Would you have been able to keep such a positive attitude? Would you have been able to jump back in? Would your business have been able to run successfully with you away from the business for a year? Think of that. I know I challenge myself and think about my business, and I actually think One Firefly would. I don't want to test it out. But would your business run without you in that seat? And just think about the positive attitude and the impact of attitude on your success in life and business. Lot of fun, and a lot of these stories that we heard here, I had not actually heard, and I'm going to say shame on me, because I've known Brett for many years, and I really enjoyed this conversation. So just to get into the normal show stuff, if you haven't already, make sure to follow us on Instagram. We try to keep our content updated pretty regularly there. Additionally, love you to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching here on video, this is an audio only format. In fact, when Brett came on, Brett thought this was only audio, because that's how he listens to the show. So we were talking, and we're like, yeah, we're live streamed as well. So inversely, if you watch it live but want to be able to listen to all the different guests and interviews, definitely just go to your favorite app and subscribe. And if you feel so compelled, leave us a review. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. I hope you all have a strong rest of your week. And I will see you next week for the next show, show 178. Thanks so much, everyone. Be well.